Bitcoin by the end of this cycle will top between 150 to 200k at the very least. This was the exact idea I gave last video, where at that time Bitcoin was at 108k, knocking on breaking all-time highs. It did exactly that, having locally topped at 123k recently, but as each passing day goes by, I am more and more confident about these targets and about a subsequent altcoin season to follow. Now here is something you'll find very interesting. This swing low and this consolidation pattern was getting compared a lot to the summer chop of 2024. I did not think this was the case, however. This dip instead reminded me of what happened in 2023. In 2023, we got two tops followed by a fake out break to the downside, but then ultimately that led to the run to 74k in March of 2024. Now it may not seem like it up here, but allow me to now get a fractal. From the very bottom of Bitcoin this cycle to that top that we talked about, this is how the pattern would look. Now let me bring this pattern to up here and you'll see what it is I'm talking about. If I move that pattern and print it onto our current run, it will look something like this. The swing low pattern followed by two tops, a fake breakout to the downside, but then ultimately that resolved to the upside. So far, we've been following this to the T, and this actually helped my Discord group stay bullish during the lows of 74k. In fact, this fractal was one of the things we relied on to get us out of that mess. And so far, it's playing out to the T. Now, this pattern gets all the way up to 260k, but that's not the point. This actually isn't even to prove that my numbers will be hit. It's more so to show the sheer pace of how Bitcoin can go upward. A move from 25k to 74k is something that most people were able to conceptualize. If you say a 200k Bitcoin will happen, a lot of people will struggle in imagining that. But percentage-wise, it's actually not that much, but we've seen more aggressive moves in shorter periods of time in the past. That said, I don't want you to get your hopes up and assume it's going to be a straight shot upward. An idea we've been consistently talking about since May on this channel is that from 74k, there's going to be a summer run. That summer run is now happening. Go back and watch the videos. We talked about this to the T, but then also discussed the idea of potentially taking profits to buy back lower for if a dip occurs sometime between now and the end of September. I know others are now starting to say a similar thing in the past couple weeks, but this has been the idea on this channel for a long time now. For proof, here is the clip of a video I made back a couple months ago in May, April, talking about this very idea. I titled it Bitcoin to 128k, back down to 89 before 207, basically explaining this idea that we'll get a run yet again, but that it may not end up being the final run where we then get a subsequent pullback where we can load up again, and then we go for the final run later this year. Watch this. Kind of thinking is, okay, what if we pump yet again, have altcoins run, and then dump yet again? Where during that time and that dump, the Fed should fully pivot and allow for possibly the final run to end things off and the main altcoin season we wanted all along, which lines up with a top later this year. Price action could kind of be foreshadowing that. And if you've been watching the channel, you know that I'm very adamant on the fact that price action typically dictates what the narrative and such is going to be. The great thing about it though is that we don't even have to worry about this right now. Instead, we're just going to be focused on this run right now. And so here we are, fast forward a couple months. Again, some are now starting to say the same idea. We've stuck with it for a while and we're starting to see it happen. We're pushing August, we're pushing higher numbers. It seems like the top could be in, but if this run continues, I think stabling up a little is not a bad idea. To then load up on the subsequent dump, which we'll get to in a second, and why I think that may happen, for then the final push of this cycle, which again, I am very bullish on. Now here is the important thing, listen up. Everyone knows that in crypto, Q4 of the post-halving year is bullish. We spoke about it for a lot of this video. You'll hear everyone else talking about it too. The thing is, My targets are not going to change. These are my end of cycle targets. Only thing that might be different is the timing of when that happens. Now, even though I think it'll be Q4, there are some things we have to adjust for. One is the slight possibility that the final run of this cycle, where we hit these targets, could be underway right now. So instead of this dip, we sort of chop and just keep going up, ultimately topping sometime in Q3, between August to maybe like mid-October. Now, is this my base case? Not necessarily, but the reason it's important to bring up, everyone knows that rate cuts will come eventually. Even though Powell did not cut yesterday and may not cut in September, everyone is still waiting for rate cuts. And so it's going to happen inevitably sometime soon. A good friend of mine said rate cuts are bearish. And I think where he's coming from is that everyone is so ready for rate cuts that when they come, it may not be as big a deal as we're assuming it'll be. So right now, could we be front running this bullish Q4 idea and having it all happen right now in Q3? That would throw a lot of people off. The way I will personally hedge for that is by not going 100% risk off with our original idea of this. So I'm not going to sell my entire portfolio to try and buy back lower. I don't think that's wise. I think you want to keep exposure because ultimately we do have 5 months left. That said, I also don't think it's wise to continue holding altcoins blindly if we do get a pullback sometime soon. So the way I'm playing it is the best of both worlds. I'm slowly stabling up and DCAing out every day with this uptrend, taking out 1 to 2% into stables, building up a stablecoin reservoir to then tap into when we get that likely dump between, I'd say, now and the end of September. Now, how high do we go before that? I'm not sure. 130, 140, 150k, whatever it is. I'll be scaling out slowly along the way. And then if that flash crash occurs, having about 20 to 50% in stables to allocate. And if it doesn't and we keep ripping upward, still being mostly exposed and then also having the belief in myself to allocate into altcoins that have yet to run. Because again, I do think this cycle ends with an altcoin season. If you want assistance in navigating this tricky last 5 months, I do have an exclusive Discord group where I spend all my time at giving updates, giving calls, where we give the likes of ETH at 1400 planning out a long back in March when it was very close to its bottom, where for this run in early March, we front run this stablecoin narrative giving CRV at 37 cents, having done a 3x and in my opinion having just getting started for what's likely going to be a lot more by the end of this cycle, using that 2023 fractal as an example to stay long for that low that occurred at 74k for a run up to 120k plus. This is the type of stuff we've been doing for the last several months, along with a multitude of other calls. There is a link in the description if you're interested. There's 2 variants, the standard and pain edition. The standard edition, you get all of this 24/7, and in the pain edition, along with that, you get one-on-one help with me, which includes direct messaging and a call where we discuss your specific goals and getting there. And so far, we have a good amount of Pain Edition members very close to their goals. So if you're interested to join, make sure to check out the link in the description for the last 5 months of this cycle. Now, 150 to 200k may seem like a lot. If that ends up happening, it'd be a lot like 2017, right? I think this run, if it finishes up here, especially 200k plus, this cycle will be looked a lot like 2017 rather than 2021. Now, I, for one, was here in 2017. And here's why I'm talking about these pullbacks so confidently and why I've been talking about them since the bottom back in April. Here is the chart for 2017. Up only pretty much, right? Well, not really. We'll get to that in a second. But notice how in 2017, it was the final 5 weeks specifically where it just went absolutely parabolic. This is why I think a 200k plus Bitcoin for this cycle is not completely off the table. If you say that, people will call you crazy. But if we get that type of finish, it may also explain why we have not gotten the altcoin season so many have been anticipating this cycle. If Bitcoin was supposed to get to 200k plus, why would we get the altcoin season when it's 100k or 75k? That does not make sense. And as bullish and as vertical this cycle may end up being, there was still severe pullbacks along the way. Fast flash crashes that happened. One of them occurred in the summer in June of 2017 and bottomed in July. That ended up being a 40% dip. And then again, we had one in the late summer into September, a 40% crash yet again. And then another 30% pullback in November. This is where that idea comes from. the original idea that we pitched in this video, where for this cycle, we could recover from the 74k low, which happened, make a new high, which has happened at 123k so far, where we then pull back again, maybe sometime starting in August up until the low of September, and then we go for it again. So for me, it's about taking out small stablecoin positions up until that top, waiting for a bottom, and allocating as close as I can to that bottom for the ultimate blow off top. I am very confident that for this cycle between now and the end of September, we get a 20% pullback in Bitcoin. Now, I don't know where Bitcoin tops before that. It may be 130, 140k, where we then may come back down to 110k or something before it's lift off again. But the reason it's so important to emphasize that is because if we get that run up to, let's say, 130k plus, people are going to be obsessed with altcoin season yet again. For me, I don't want to fall into that trap, so I'm going to do the best of both, staying allocated, but then also taking profits. I highly recommend you go through every video I posted this year. It has been fairly accurate. It hasn't been 100% hit rate, but I'd say like 70-80%, which is pretty damn good. I will continue to upload a lot more for these final 5 months, and again, spending most of my time in that Discord that I have. So make sure you're subscribed for more videos you don't want to miss out for the altcoin picks, and I will catch you very soon.